She slapped a paper on my boat like she was a cop and shouted, "You can't park this here!" Her voice echoed across the water, sharp and ugly. I looked at her and almost laughed, because the boat wasn't on the street, it was floating in the middle of my lake. My lake. She stood on the dock with two other HOA board members, arms crossed, faces red like they were declaring war. One of them held a clipboard and said, "This is a violation of HOA policy. Remove your vessel or face penalties." I stayed calm, gripping the rail of my boat, letting the silence sit heavy. They thought they had power, thought they were in charge. Karen smirked like she had already won, but in that moment I knew something they didn't. They weren't standing on HOA property. They were standing on mine. The lake they thought they controlled? I owned every inch of it, and soon their little fishing club, their fake rules, and their smug smiles were about to sink faster than a stone dropped in deep water. Karen lifted her chin and waved the clipboard like it was a badge. "Failure to comply will result in fines and towing of your property," she barked. Her words made a few neighbors step out onto their porches, whispering as if something illegal was unfolding. I leaned against the side of my boat, not moving, not blinking, just watching her dig her own grave. Then she pulled out her phone. "If you don't move this junk now, I'll call security," she snapped. Within minutes, a black SUV pulled up. Two men stepping out in cheap uniforms that looked bought off Amazon. They wore badges clipped crookedly to their belts, guns on their hips, and a smug attitude that screamed fake authority. "Sir, step off the vessel. This area is under HOA jurisdiction," one of them ordered, hand resting on his holster. The crowd around us gasped. Phones lifted to record. Karen smirked wider, like she was queen of the lake, ready to see me dragged away in handcuffs. I could feel the tension in the air, neighbors whispering, "Is he really breaking the law?" I raised my voice so everyone could hear. "This is my lake. This dock, this water, every fish swimming in it, I own it. You don't get to tell me where I can park." My words hit like a stone thrown into still water, sending ripples through the crowd. Karen's face faltered for a split second, then she doubled down. "Lies!" she screamed. "You think a piece of paper makes you king here? These men will remove you." The so-called officers stepped closer, but I didn't move. I smiled, slow and steady, because they didn't know what I knew. Karen thought she had cornered me, but the truth was about to flip this entire scene upside down. And when it did, her empire of fake rules would collapse right in front of everyone watching. One of the fake cops reached for his cuffs, metal glinting in the sun, and the crowd held their breath. Karen folded her arms like a judge waiting for the guilty to be dragged away. "Arrest him," she hissed. That's when I pulled out a leather folder from the seat of my boat and held it high. "Before you embarrass yourselves any further, maybe you should read this." The men hesitated, but Karen snapped, "Don't listen to him. He's bluffing." I opened the folder, letting the papers catch the light. "This," I said slowly, "is the deed. The county records. Every square foot of this lake, including the dock you're standing on, belongs to me. Not the HOA, not Karen, me." Gasps rippled through the neighbors. Phone zoomed in, recording every word. Karen's smirk cracked into a nervous twitch, but she tried to hold her ground. "Those documents are fake," she stammered, though her voice shook. The so-called officers glanced at each other, their act slipping. They weren't expecting proof. They weren't expecting me to be calm. I leaned closer, voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "You might want to think twice before you play dress-up with badges, because impersonating law enforcement is a federal crime." And I'd know. I paused, letting the silence drag heavy, all eyes on me. "Since I'm the one who trains the deputies in this county." The crowd erupted with whispers, some laughing, some stunned. Karen's jaw dropped, color draining from her face. The two fake cops froze, hands stiff by their sides, no longer so eager to act tough. The power in the air had shifted. Suddenly it wasn't me on trial, it was them. And the best part? This was only the beginning of their nightmare. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to claw back control. "He's lying!" "He's just making this up so you'll all feel sorry for him," she shouted, waving her arms wildly. But the neighbors weren't buying it anymore. They were whispering things like, "Did you hear that? He trains the deputies? And so the HOA doesn't even own the lake?" Phones were everywhere now. Every angle capturing Karen's meltdown in real time. The fake cops looked trapped, their cheap uniforms suddenly looking more like costumes at a Halloween party. One of them tugged nervously at his fake badge while the other muttered under his breath, "We should go." But Karen wasn't done digging her grave. She stormed toward the edge of the dock, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You can't do this. This lake belongs to the community. We run the fishing club here, we make the rules." That's when I cut her off, my voice calm but sharp enough to slice through her tantrum. "No, I make the rules here. You've been trespassing on my property, running your little fishing club without permission, and every dime you've collected from members, that's theft." The crowd gasped again, louder this time, the weight of my words sinking in. Karen's face went pale, but before she could speak, I pulled out my phone and tapped a button. The dock speakers, usually used for summer parties, crackled to life. From them played a recording of Karen's own voice, captured by the cameras I'd installed weeks ago. "They'll never know. We'll just keep saying the lake is HOA property. He's too dumb to fight back." The moment the words blasted over the water, the entire neighborhood went silent. Then came the laughter, the gasps, the phone zooming closer. Karen froze, mouth open but no sound coming out. The fake cops backed away completely, no longer willing to stand beside her. The look on her face was priceless, like she'd just realized the world she built on lies was crumbling in front of everyone. And I wasn't finished yet. Karen's hands shook as she lunged toward the speaker, fumbling to yank the cord, but the recording had already burned itself into every phone camera pointed at her. Neighbors laughed nervously, some even cheering, and one man shouted, "Guess the HOA queen just got dethroned." Her cheeks turned crimson, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. I stood tall on the boat, letting the silence drag for just a second longer before dropping the next hammer. "You tried to intimidate me with fake fines, fake cops, and lies about this lake. But here's the truth." I tapped my phone again and a different file played through the speakers, this time video. It showed Karen handing envelopes of cash to the so-called officers, whispering, "Just make him move. Scare him if you have to." The crowd exploded, some gasping, some shouting, some outright laughing at her stupidity. A teenager yelled, "World's dumbest HOA scam," while others filmed every angle, already knowing this footage would be online within minutes. Karen staggered back, gripping the dock rail as though it could keep her from collapsing. That's not real," she screamed, but her voice cracked into a sob. The two fake cops tried to slip away quietly toward their SUV, but I wasn't about to let them vanish. I called out loud and steady, "Not so fast. You're not going anywhere until the real authorities arrive." My words carried across the lake, and before Karen could scream another excuse, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance. Her head snapped around, eyes wide, panic spreading across her face. The neighbors cheered, clapping, whistling, as flashing blue and red lights grew brighter at the end of the street. The timing was perfect, like the whole town had been waiting for her downfall. Karen's empire of fake rules was seconds away from shattering, and she knew it. The black SUV doors slammed shut just as the real patrol cars rolled up, sirens cutting off with a sharp wail. Two uniformed deputies stepped out, the kind of presence that makes everyone instantly quiet. Karen's face went sheet white, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. One deputy scanned the scene, eyes landing on the fake cops, then on Karen. "We got a call about a disturbance. Somebody want to explain why these men are wearing imitation badges on private property?" The crowd burst into laughter, phones still recording. One neighbor shouted, "Check the speakers." "We heard it all." Another added, "She's been running a scam." Karen waved her hands frantically. No, it's all a mistake. These men are HOA security. We were just enforcing community rules." The deputy raised a hand, silencing her. "Ma'am, there's no such thing as HOA police. What you've got here looks a lot like impersonating law enforcement. That's a felony." The words hit her harder than any slap could. She staggered backward, eyes wide, shaking her head. "No, you don't understand. I was just trying to keep order. He doesn't even belong here." That's when I stepped forward, handing the deed papers to the second deputy. "Actually, officer, I own every inch of this lake. Karen and her friends have been trespassing for months, collecting cash from neighbors to use the lake for their fishing club. I've got video, audio, and witnesses." The deputy flipped through the documents, nodding. "Looks clean. Recorded and filed." He turned to the fake cops, who were now visibly sweating. "Drop the weapons. Hands where I can see them." Reluctantly, they obeyed, setting their cheap pistols on the hood of the SUV. Karen lunged forward, screeching, "You can't arrest me. I'm the president of the HOA." But the first deputy caught her wrist mid-swing and snapped the cuffs around her hands. The crowd erupted, clapping, whistling, some even chanting, "Justice! Justice!" As Karen was shoved into the back of the patrol car, her eyes locked on me through the window, pure hatred mixing with disbelief. She had spent months thinking she was untouchable. Now she was just another criminal, caught by her own arrogance, and the best part, the night wasn't over. The patrol cars pulled away slowly, Karen thrashing in the back seat, her muffled screams fading as the neighborhood erupted into cheers. But I wasn't celebrating, not yet. I knew the truth. Karen had left more damage behind than just today's circus. The fishing club she ran wasn't a hobby, it was a cash cow, and she'd bled half the neighborhood dry with fake lake membership fees. Some people had paid hundreds, some even thousands, thinking it was legitimate. I climbed onto the dock, holding the folder tight in my hand. "Listen up, everyone," I said, my voice carrying across the water. "Every dime she stole, every so-called membership payment was illegal. But I'm not going to let her crime end with your loss." I pulled out a second set of documents, this one stamped with a lawyer's seal. "I've already filed civil claims. Every one of you will be reimbursed from her assets. The money she scammed out of this community will come back to you." The crowd gasped, then cheered louder than before. A mother near the front wiped a tear from her cheek and whispered. Finally, someone stood up to her. A father clapped me on the back, shaking his head. "We thought she owned us. Turns out you owned it all along." But the night still had one last twist. I pressed a button on my phone, and the giant digital screen on my dock lit up. A screen I usually used for family movie nights. Instead of a film, up popped live footage from my security cameras. Karen inside the patrol car screaming and threatening the deputies, spitting out lines like, "You'll regret this. I'll sue every single one of you." The entire neighborhood roared with laughter as her meltdown played larger than life, projected across the lake she once claimed was hers. I let the laughter ride out before saying calmly, "This is why you never mess with someone who has the truth on his side." She thought she had power, but power built on lies always collapses. The neighbors cheered again, this time not just for me but for themselves, for freedom from her grip. And yet, deep inside, I knew there was one last move to make before this war was truly over. The night air settled, the flashing patrol lights fading down the road, but the energy around the lake still buzzed like electricity. Neighbors stayed gathered on the dock, their faces lit up by the big screen and the glow of their phones. Some were laughing, some were still shaking their heads in disbelief, but all of them looked relieved, like a heavy chain had finally been cut loose from their necks. I took a long breath and looked out over the water. The lake was calm, moonlight rippling across it like silver glass. For months, Karen had treated it like her throne, but now it stood exactly as it should, quiet, free, and mine. I turned back to the crowd. "This country was built on one simple idea," I said, voice steady. "A man's land is his. You don't bully him off it. You don't steal it. And you sure as hell don't lie about owning it." My words hung heavy in the night, and I saw people nodding, eyes wet, some even clapping softly. A veteran neighbor, old, walking with a cane, raised his voice. "We fought for freedom, not for people like her to abuse it." His words carried more weight than anything else could. The crowd cheered again, louder this time, the kind that echoed across the water. I felt my chest tighten, not from anger anymore, but from pride. "I didn't fight for this country just to be told I can't park my boat on my own lake," I added, my voice sharp but calm. That line hit like a thunderclap. Phones caught it, neighbors repeated it, and I knew it would spread far beyond this dock. The fishing club was dissolved. Karen was gone. And the lake, the heart of this neighborhood, was finally free from her grip. I stepped back onto my boat, the crowd still cheering, my family waiting with proud smiles. For the first time in months, the lake felt like home again. And as the engine hummed and I drifted into the moonlit water, I knew one thing for certain. No matter how loud the Karens of the world screamed, the truth would always drown them.